We are live. See it. Yeah, thank you. Senate Education Committee, Friday, March 14th, 1 o'clock. And we have with us, Legislative Council, that's St. James, let her introduce herself for the record in a minute. And we're going to spend the next hour or whatever, hour and a half if we need to, exploring Union School District formation and organization. And that obviously relates to the work in which the larger work we're engaged. This is some background work that us understand the elements, some of the elements we need to think about as we move forward. So with that, and I know you have some, you put the title up for us it's on our webpage. So with that, I'll turn it over to start walking us through.
Thank you.
What are you thinking about?
That's St. James Office of Legislative Counsel. So what I plan to do today is just share my screen and walk us through some of the elements in Chapter 11 and Title 16, which is the Union School District chapter. And really primarily looking at subchapter 1 and subchapter 2. Subchapter 3 and 4 are the laws that govern a union school district once it's up and running. So 10 years from now, you've been operating a school district for 10 years, there's a vacancy. You would go here to figure out the process for filling that vacancy. Subchapter 2 is all about how do you form and organize a union school district. Now, this is a voluntary process. What we're going to walk through is in the context of 2 or more school districts getting together on their own initiative and making a decision to merge. The larger context that you all have been discussing about the education transformation and what the governor has proposed is not a voluntary process. It would be the legislature creating those school districts. However, I think that this is helpful in walking through the exploration, formation, organization subchapter to help you think about and think through some of the processes, concepts, etc., that might need to happen regardless of whether it's a voluntary formation or whether it's an involuntary formation and you all are chartering new consolidated school districts. So with all of that said, Chapter 11, again, remember we've got multiple different kinds of school districts in Vermont. We've got town school districts, incorporated school districts, city school districts, and then union school districts. This chapter is only about union school districts. What you all are considering in the education transformation, under current law, all of those school districts would probably be considered union school districts because they would be merged school districts. The term union school district is a term that you all made up many years ago, right? So as you move forward, and if you continue to consider some larger transformation package, you don't have to stick with the term union school district. In fact, I might suggest that it might be, confusing, right? To have the same term on June 30th mean one thing and on July 1 mean another. So just throwing that out there. So the first thing I'm going to point you to is the policy. Oh, and the other thing I should say before we start this is union school districts have been around for many decades, many decades. But you can see here in 2022, the legislature actually rehauled Chapter 11. It repealed Chapter 11 in its entirety and then plunked all of this in. It was largely all of the current law at that time concepts with far more context and detail. And it was a project that was undertaken over several years between the Agency of Education, the School Boards Association, and the Secretary of State's office, mainly the Elections Division, to get draft language down. And that is ultimately what you all passed with some minor changes. So policy, I'm just going to read this because I think I think it may be helpful for you all to think about when you're thinking about what your goals are or your policy is for any sort of transformation of the system. So it is the policy of the state to provide substantially equal educational opportunities. It is Friday. It is beautiful out. I am going to revert to the Socratic method. Where are we getting that term? Substantially equal educational opportunities.
Well, from the air.
But you would think from a rigorous decision, but does this actually predate?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
For all children in Vermont by authorizing 2 or more school districts, including an existing union school district, to form a union school district for the purpose of providing for the education of its resident students in the grades for which it is organized, and for the new union school district to be a body politic and corporate with the powers incident to a municipal corporation. What is one reason powers incident to a municipal corporation is an important phrase? How do we fund education in this state?
Through tax.
Correct. With all of the rights and responsibilities that a town school district has in providing for the education of its resident students. So it's just a different form. It's a different kind of school district. The rights and responsibilities are all the same. Formation of union school districts shall be designed to encourage and support local decisions and actions that provide substantial equity of educational opportunities statewide, lead students to achieve or exceed the state's education quality standards, maximize operational efficiencies, promote transparency and accountability, and be delivered at a cost that parents, voters, and taxpayers value. So that's all current law. And you are going to see through what we are about to walk through, there are various checkpoints of either a deliverable to the public or a decision that the state board has to make. And there will be a lot of references to if it meets the policy in section 701. And so this is, whenever you see that, the policy in section 701, this is what we're talking about. So I'm not going to go over definitions. I'm going to jump right into, then we'll spend as much time as you want to spend on some of these, but I'm just going to kind of jump around at what I think is the appropriate speed for now. So how does a union school district form right now? The boards of 2 or more school districts would vote to establish a study committee. They would figure out who amongst themselves are going to sit on that study committee. Their budget for that study committee is going to be apportioned amongst the school districts that are participating in it based on, this is outdated at this point. There needs to be a lot of conforming amendments in Title 16, but we no longer have equalized people. So it would probably be long-term ADM. So anyway, they get together and they discuss, if you will. And that's just the school districts deciding to do that. If the budget to do the study, to decide whether forming a union school district is a good idea, is more than 50 grand, the voters of those school districts have to approve it. If it's under 50, it doesn't have to go to the voters.
How was that language?
How old?
Yeah.
So this entire chapter was replaced in 2022.
Okay.
But that concept existed prior to that. And so I would have to go back and look at our previous law for.
That's okay.
Yep.
Suppression of 22.
Okay. So what does the study committee do? So they get together, they have to elect a chair, the staff, so central office is providing administrative support. The Agency of Education is supposed to make agency staff available to provide technical assistance. It's a public body, so public records and open meeting law apply. Although a study committee should try to achieve consensus, committee decisions shall be reached by a majority. There's a concept of necessary school districts and advisable school districts. Necessary school districts is just what it sounds like. The union school district couldn't form without them. Advisable school districts means, yeah, it's a good idea if you come along for the journey, but if you don't want to join us, we're still going to form without you.
So what we are tasking ourselves to do, say, the 9 districts or 10 or 12. Will it be almost having to rewrite this?
I would imagine, in the universe of possibilities, I would imagine if you, the General Assembly, charter new school districts, that you will, there is a lot in Chapter 11 that is going to be helpful and may even be able to be just pulled verbatim out of Chapter 11. But I would say you probably have to start from scratch. Because the scale at what these new districts are operating at is going to be very different than the scale at which these just the union school districts are currently operating at. For example, I think you have heard testimony from the Secretary of State's office that at least for the governor's proposal for the 5 school districts, those 5 school districts would become the largest political subdivisions in the state. And therefore the election cycle for those school boards would probably make sense to be on a statewide election in November. That's not how it works for union school districts now. And that's what a lot of this is election law. So it really is going to depend on a lot of the policy choices you make. But the concepts in here, I think, can be amended or borrowed from, but I don't think you can just take Chapter 11 and use it for what you're thinking of doing without making changes.
And as we put this together, we have somebody like yourself that helps us along
That is
the way.
my job.
All right. We're going to be busy. May want to get some help.
I am ready and willing to do this. Okay, so they get together, they elect a chair, they do all of that fun stuff. What are they actually doing? Well, they're trying to figure out if it makes sense to form a union school district. And here is what they are looking for. They have to produce a report and proposed articles of agreement outlining the ways in which a union school district promotes the policies set forth in section 701 of this chapter, right? So orienting you back to the cost that's good for the taxpayers, meeting education quality standards, all of those policies, right? So an analogous way to think about that is, what are your guiding principles when you are, if you are forming new school districts? If you all are setting these boundaries, what is your section 701? So the study committee shall also prepare proposed articles of agreement that would be the operating agreement for the new union school district. And here's what those articles of agreement need to state at a minimum. And so if you look at any merger study committee reports, whether they came out of Act 46 or after Act 46, what you're going to see is this nice report about all of the work and the conversations that the study committee have, and then you're going to see articles of agreement. So what's the name of the new school district? Which I think is a policy question and decision for you all that we haven't even begun to talk about. Who's naming these school districts, right? So what are the school districts that are necessary? What are the school districts that are advisable? What grades the union school district will operate? And what grades, if any, it will pay tuition for? The cost and general location of any new proposed school buildings to be constructed, and the cost and general description of any proposed renovations to existing buildings, right? It's nice that you get together and you make this decision that it makes sense to merge school districts, but do you have the space to do that, and appropriate classroom space to do that? And do you need to make any changes there? A plan for the first year of the union school district's operation for transportation of students, assignment of staff, and use of curriculum that is consistent with existing contracts, collective bargaining agreements, and other provisions of law. And then the board would make all the subsequent decisions when it's up and running. What's the debt of all of these districts that are at the table? What are the assets of all of these districts that are at this table? And this is a big one for me, and I would suggest it should be a big one for you. What is the representational model for your new school board? The United States Constitution, under the Equal Protection Clause, requires proportional representation. There's a lot of what Chapter 11 does is it spells out, if you make this choice, here are all the things you need to consider. If you make this choice, here are all the things. It's a menu of options. You all, if you choose to charter new school districts, you would likely be choosing that menu of options for them. Probably limiting it to one is my guess. And so what is that proportional model of representation that you're going to be choosing? Or just what is the model of representation? This is a little out of my wheelhouse. This is something more appropriate for my GovOps colleagues, my Ledge Council GovOps colleagues, to really advise you on. But I can tell you at-large representation is essentially you have a fiduciary duty to be voting and thinking for the district as a whole. So if the district is made up of towns 1 through 10, and all of the board members come from town 4, they all have a duty to be making responsibilities in the best interests of towns 1 through 4, the whole school district. If it is some other model where there's proportional representation, like towns 1 through 10 each get a member, then that's going to trigger an analysis under the Equal Protection Clause to make sure that there's no vote dilution, that everyone, all of the member districts, all of the voters in those member districts have an equal vote on their school board. And that's kind of the process that you all go through for reapportionment. So when you hear talk of wards, I think it's in the governor's proposal in H 454, there's a mention of wards being created to determine representation on the school boards. That's the process that I think the Secretary of State's office has been testifying to you all about jointly with your GovOps colleagues, and is a very complicated process. What are the terms of offices for each member on the school board? What is the date that you're going to be submitting this? So the study committee is making a proposal. The state board, spoiler alert, the state board has to approve that proposal, but then ultimately the voters have to approve the proposal. So on what date is this proposal going to the voters? On what date is the Union School District going to be responsible for the education of its students? Let's see. Are you going to use Australian ballot, or is everything going to be from the floor? That's choice. And then any other matters that the study committee deems pertinent. So if the study committee gets together and says, this isn't really a good idea, they write a report that says that and they're done, they're dissolved. Everyone goes back to their own side of the ring. If they propose to form a union school district, then they have to write up that report, they have to have those articles of agreement, and then we go to the next step.
709.
Yes, 709. Yep. So the study committee is going to transmit its report and the proposed articles of agreement to all of the school districts that are at the table. They can weigh in, but ultimately the study committee has the sole authority to determine the contents of that report. And then if the study committee, after they hear from all of those school districts, if they still determine that it's advisable to move forward, they send their report and the articles of agreement to the Secretary of Education, who reviews them and then makes a recommendation to the state board. So then the state board has to consider the report, the articles of agreement, and the secretary's recommendations, has to provide the study committee an opportunity to be heard, may ask for further information, and it may request the study committee to amend the report or the articles of agreement or both. And here's what the state board is looking for. So if the state board finds that the proposed union school district is in the best interest of the state, the students, and the school district, and aligns with the policy set forth in section 701 of this title, then it shall approve the study committee's report. Okay, so remember, all a voluntary process, but that's not the end. We haven't formed anything yet because the voters actually form it. So in that lovely and large study committee report, the study committee has chosen and proposed a date for the ultimate vote, and that vote has to be held by Australian ballot at separate school district meetings throughout the districts that are forming this union school district on the same day, Early and absentee voting rights are provided, and they have to warn the vote as either a special meeting or at its annual meeting if that's where it happens to fall. At the same time, you are voting on whether or not to form the Union School District. You're also going to elect your initial board members, because if everyone votes yes, you got to be able to hit the ground running. You can't waste time having a separate election. So this section 711, provides all of the information you would need to get on the ballot for your initial board member seat. And there's some definitions here, but what I want to just point out is the menu of, when I was talking about the menu of options, here is a great example. So for proportional to town population, if that is what the study committee is recommending for representation on your school board, here's the process you follow for getting on the ballot. If it's a modified at-large model, here's the process you follow for getting on a ballot. And if it is at-large representation, here's the process you follow for getting on a ballot. This is very detailed. And so then you would be, the voters are voting on, and then there's Title 11 or Chapter 11 gives you a sample warning for this vote. Got all the information you need to have right there in law. The vote happens. Within 45 days after the vote, or 15 days after a vote to reconsider. So a lot of the election law concepts that apply to every other election in the state are also applying to school district elections. Then the results of those votes go to the Secretary of Education. And if everyone in the necessary districts said yes, then you got a union school district. If one district said no, no union school district.
Now that's if in the concept that we're doing, do we fall under these rules, or?
You can do whatever you want, but no, you are not letting anything go to the voters. Your seats are what the voters voted on.
So if we take a district and say, okay, we propose with some input from that district, what is the best school to consolidate? If we were to consolidate, I want to make sure that was out there. We could do that, and that avoids all this.
Yes, you are the legislature. Remember our Dillon's rule presentation from the very beginning of the session. You breathe life into municipalities. And you also, I don't remember the exact quote, so what I've been saying, because it's crossover week and I'm tired, is you get to pill them too. So all of these school districts are municipalities. So you get to decide whether you're disbanding them or you're merging them. And you could, in the universe of legal possibilities, you could decide to form new school districts, but leave it up to the voters to approve them. And if you do that, and the voters vote no, you're back here where we are today. Or you've got 7 huge school districts and 75 tiny little ones, right? So usually what happens when the government is chartering municipalities is you create it, and then the votes happen as they are running the municipality that you have created in the normal course of the business. So subsequent elections, subsequent bylaw amendments, etc. But if the legislature is chartering boundaries for a school district, no, it does not have to be voted on by the voters.
And what we're doing is telling that district, if we could have their input on though, is to say, okay, after further looking over this district, here's how we would like to.
You no longer exist. These 3 towns that formed the school district, you no longer are part of that school district because that school district does not exist. You are now part of this larger school district, and we have created that school district. Let's see. So, so if one necessary district says no, no union school district. But if an advisable school district says no, the union school district still forms because they were not necessary to the formation. So if an advisable district says yes, then they join the union school district, but their votes are not crucial to the formation of the district. Then the results get certified, etc. And so when the Secretary of State records the certification, so the Secretary of State is recording the certification of a vote. If you all are chartering something, there's no necessary need for the Secretary of State to record something. There might be some policy reason to do something like that. But the Secretary of State is involved here because there's an election. The union school district shall be a body politic and corporate with the powers incident to a municipal corporation, shall be known by the name or number given in the recorded certification. By that name or number may be sued and be sued, and may hold and convey real and personal property. So once that vote is recorded, that municipality springs to life. So now what happens? And then this section 714, is just about tallying votes for the initial board member elections. And so I'm not going to go through the detail of that.
We'll have initial board member elections.
Yes, we will have, I would suggest that you would need to have initial board member elections, yes. And depending on policy choices you make, you may or may not need to have separate law for that. It may be that you're able to reference concepts in Title 17, the election title, without having to create new law. It may be that you have to create some new law. It may be that you need to make some session law that's applicable to this one point in time. That would really be a question for our GovOps colleagues.
So when you decide a district, you want to create the school board, and you want to make sure that you're getting equal representation from the 10. If we pick that they have 7 towns, so we make a 7-board school board and say, hey, we want to make sure every town has at least one person be a school board member. You see that opens up a lot more. It's a little harder to do that.
No, it's not hard to do anything because you're the legislature.
Okay, well, I just like
the legal consequences.
Yes.
Yeah. So the union school, the consolidated school district that you all are considering creating, chartering, is one municipality with all of the people living in that school district. They belong to their towns for their town purposes, but for school district purposes, there's no boundaries other than that one boundary. And so we need to make sure that everyone in that, it's like your Senate district. So we need to make sure that everyone in your Senate district or in the school district has equal voices on that school board. And there's a whole host of constitutional issues and case law surrounding how to do that and the considerations that need to go into that. And the most analogous process is the redistricting process. And so it's possible, if you're doing anything other than at-large membership, which remember is just everyone has a duty to be thinking of the whole, not just where they're coming from. If you're talking about one area of your school district having one member associated with it, you want to make sure that the voices for that one member have the same weight as the voices for another member. And again, that's a conversation for our GovOps colleagues to really advise you on, because that's outside of my scope of practice.
Okay.
But I know enough to tell you that this is an area that you want to get right.
Now I see why nobody's touched that.
And I will just tell you, H454, the governor's proposal, it mentions wards, but it doesn't do any of that work in there. So we don't have anything to work with right now.
So we had a joint meeting session with the GovOps.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that the Secretary of State recommended that we do redistricting based on the process they use for the electoral districts. Is that not correct?
I am not gonna speak
Okay.
for what she recommended. I can tell you that, in my opinion,
I'm asking you.
yeah, the process that comes closest to what you will need to do to make sure there's proportional representation on new school boards that you all are creating is the redistricting process.
And I mean, I don't want to, maybe this happens elsewhere. I don't want to sound Burlington centric, but Burlington's the only place I can think of that is a large city, but it has wards and districts. So it has people who represent an eighth of the city that represent a ward, and then a quarter of the city that represent a district. So they represent 2 wards. I'm not saying we make it that complicated, but Burlington has wards within the city for the city council and the school board.
That is an excellent analogy for a municipality that has wards versus the state and your political,
And
you
my
know.
district has just the opposite. We have some small schools would need to be combined.
So does Rutland have wards? Doesn't Rutland have wards too?
City.
Yeah. So, yeah, Rutland City, I think the school board has wards also.
But not the municipality, not
Not
the
the town.
schools,
Oh.
not the smaller
Mhm.
districts.
This is complicated stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so
But I just want to make sure I understand it. In Burlington, at least, the wards are designed at the city level and then advanced to us for approval. Maybe that's out of your zone.
that is out of my zone. I would encourage you to get my GovOps colleagues in here or have your GovOps colleagues get my GovOps colleagues somewhere. You all are chartering these school districts. The legislature chartered Burlington way back in the day, right? So, to start, you all are probably gonna have to do it. And then maybe when we need to re-up things, maybe that's where the school districts are charged with doing that and making recommendations to the legislature to update those. I don't know.
No, I'm just, my face is like, that is redistricting to the nth degree. I mean, that is.
Yep.
I do not wish that on anyone, any one entity to do that. I don't care if it's us
Or any
or
chair.
the commission.
Education.
We're gonna have to do it. It'll actually end up being, we would set the district boundaries. And then we go, and with some direction to the GovOps committee about how we want to do it. And the GovOps committee is gonna have, we're gonna have to set up,
Set the wards also.
first time around, yeah. I think so. I don't know how else.
Well, I guess the good news is it's not every 10 years that we're not like, I mean, maybe that's good and bad news, but they can change them 2 years later if they really don't like them. No, they would be every 10 years. Right, that's what it is now in the city. Oh my God.
The GovOps committee would take a lot of testimony, and as I said, the initial boundaries, and then set up that, so.
Yeah, but I was on GovOps for
No,
Senate redistricting, and
I've been through too, yeah.
that is, 14 counties and 30 people, and that's miserable. Have you told GovOps that this is their job? Because,
Well,
Yes.
we have to.
okay,
We have to set the boundaries, we have to define it, and then they do the final.
the district boundaries.
Awards. No, we do the district.
And then we do the district
And
boundaries.
we say how many. This is just what I'm thinking, how many directors there would be, and that we want a proportional one. And then we give it to them to do it.
So you would choose single seat wards?
Well, we would have, that's a decision for this committee,
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out our decision.
Yeah.
They're huge.
Yeah.
It's
but
huge.
we would want to make sure that we're giving some direction. Because it will, and anyway, we'll get there.
Buckle in.
Yeah.
We get to do redistricting earlier than 2030, which is not fun. Never fun.
okay, so there's been it was positive. We've elected initial members. Now what happens? Well, there's a whole lot of work that happens. And what is happening kind of on a practical level is you've got two systems running at the same time. You've got, and again, remember, this is for a voluntary merger under current law. Depending on how you structure any change to the system, what I am about to say I'll just say that this is for a voluntary process, but I'm hopeful that it will guide you in the content that you need to consider. So after that vote, the Union School District springs to life. It is a body politic and corporate. But those school districts, those member school districts that sat at that table to decide to form that Union School District still exist. And so what's happening is there's going to be a transition period where the new Union School District Board is figuring out all the policies for the new school district, doing all of the work they need to do. And the old school districts, the member school districts, are still running day-to-day operations for their schools. Their school boards are still running. Those policies are still in place. They're still providing the education for their children. And they're doing a whole lot of legal work. Transfers of properties, assets, liabilities is all happening there. But you need two legal entities to be operating at the same time to transact that business. But there is going to be a one date and time where there is a magic wand and suddenly the new Union School District becomes the only school district and those other school districts are dissolved. So the transition period is what we're going to talk about now. What is the business that needs to happen for that magic wand to be able to actually be? So roles and authority during the transitional period. Well, the forming districts, the member districts, will continue to provide the education of their resident students. The board of the new Union School District will develop all of the new district policies, curriculum, educational programs, asset assessment measurements, etc. Every school district has their own policies, their own curriculum. Now, curriculum in the state of Vermont is supposed to be supervisory union wide. So it may perhaps not actually be that every school district curriculum. It may be that there are several school districts within a supervisory union that are using the same or similar curriculum. But when you're talking about a merger as large scale as what you all are contemplating now, think about all of the different policies and programs and curriculum that are being operated. And now you're asking one school district to decide what's best for this new school district. And everyone's going to have a lot of feelings about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Negotiate and enter into contractual agreements and collective bargaining agreements. We have not even begun to discuss what this means for staff contracts.
This is current law.
This is current law. But these, if you are forming new consolidated school districts, this is what those folks are going to need to consider and be doing during a transitional period.
Can I ask a dumb question? I might have
I'm
missed.
sure it's not dumb.
The vote to approve the district.
Mhm.
Do they also then need to vote to approve their representatives to the district?
Yes, they
in the same election.
Yes, happens on the same day.
Okay, it happens on the same day. So those folks are empowered to
Yes.
be doing that.
They're the ones doing all this work.
Yeah. By the way, for those who haven't been here for redistricting, at least in the Senate, because GovOps doesn't have someone from every county, there's usually a group of like 10 senators appointed to be a redistricting committee all session and do our maps and then present it to GovOps. So I just for the record, as you're thinking about it, it's often the case that we have a county representative commission made up of senators that's working separately on maps in case people want to be.
So that's a Senate responsibility now, is not the House involved with it?
The House does their own. They've all done it through GovOps, but I bet if they're doing the same thing we are for these, well, I guess it's a joint.
Yeah.
We'd have to do a House and Senate one. It's not our House maps or our Senate maps.
Figure out the wards within.
Yeah.
districts. I don't know. We'll, you know, what I'm trying to do is keep,
I'm sorry, my
Yeah.
brain is like, wow,
Not-
this is
I'm not
not
to
to
worry
go
about
there.
things that are down here yet, other than being aware that they're there. do the framework, then work down to the.
Because that's enough of a scary stuff.
Well, because otherwise,
I know,
that's a
that
big
is true.
fall that we get.
Ain't gonna let that happen.
So,
So,
but
starting there.
this is,
I'm flagging collective bargaining agreements because that is,
Yeah.
that is a hard concept to wrap your mind around, for consolidation on a scale, because collective bargaining agreements are individually bargained, by each school district, or SU, depending on where the staff lives. And, it's not just teachers. I think the staff has been left out of this conversation a little bit, but there are teachers that are organized under one collective bargaining agreement, and then staff are under a totally separate collective bargaining agreement. So lots to think about there. And again, that's outside of my practice area. So you would want to make sure that we're getting the right folks in the room for that conversation. During the transitional period, the new school board figures out a transitional budget. Then this is the real fun part. All of the assets from all the forming districts need to go to the new school district. So assets are defined as all real and personal property, operating fund accounts, special fund accounts, trust fund accounts, accounts receivable, and any other property to which the forming district holds title or over which it has control. So on or before the operational date, the forming districts have to transfer, and the Union School District has to acquire ownership over all of those assets. And those assets, under current law, would be subject to all encumbrances and conditions of use. The prohibition here, again, this is policy, but there's a prohibition between, okay, you voted yes, your district is formed. And now these forming districts decide that they're going to do a whole bunch of maintenance that they know they're not going to be on the hook for. They're going to transfer that debt. This is saying the forming district shall not transfer ownership of any asset. Oh, well, that's liability. So this is saying you don't transfer assets to any entity other than the Union School District between when the date the vote occurs and the operational date. And it's the same in this other direction for liabilities. Same for trust funds and same for reserve funds. So liabilities, assumption of liabilities, and then that prohibition is if the forming districts are incurring a bunch of debt during that transitional period, it's not an automatic that the new district would take that on. And that might not seem like a lot, but think of all of the buildings, all of the contracts, right? You've got all of these individually managed things, right? That make a school district run. And now you've got to transfer ownership or assumption of liability, et cetera. A question that I have that, what does all that cost? The work that goes into that.
A lot.
A lot of lawyers that don't even exist.
It's kind of like a chain of command. Property book costs or receipts, all owns everything, and then because you're gonna get how many copy machines you need and how many. Yeah,
But I tried to ask the Secretary of State's office, but I was at home and I don't really know what was happening. There are times when there has to be like a town vote on divesting of a particular properties, I would imagine.
So
Very clean.
the lovely part about the power that you all have is you're gonna
Eminent domain.
supersede all
Okay.
articles of agreement or charters or bylaws. You're gonna supersede everything with your action. So what happens once we get close to that operational date, and once we get to that operational date, what happens to those forming districts? Well, they dissolve or they discontinue. So on the operational date, the new unified Union School District should have all of the assets, all of the liabilities. It should have done all of its work to get the policies, et cetera, in place. And it is now responsible for the education of its resident students, and all of those forming districts cease to exist. There is a provision in here that they could stick around for 6 months to wrap up business that the Union School District can't wrap up for them. But otherwise, once that new Union School District goes operational, those forming districts cease to exist.
So I'm thinking of BOCES. Each one of these school districts has got contracts with, a call up for somebody for printers and copiers, and those are all gonna have to be resolved too, right?
No, they would be part of the transfer. So that would be
Oh.
a part of the transition process is for the forming districts or the member districts, the forming districts, they're not member districts, the forming districts to get together with the new district and figure out what happens to those contracts.
Starting assumption would be that they decide to want to come with the.
So to your point earlier, it is like a change of command where all regulations, contracts remain in effect until superseded by the following regime, in this case, the new district.
Or an acquisition of another, one company to another.
Right, exactly.
I think that's the rest of this. I think that was the process for formation. We've now gone operational. The rest of this is about either withdrawing from a district, which we're not going to talk about right now. And then subchapter, as I mentioned, subchapter 3 and 4 is okay, you're up and running. How do you continue to run your school district? Here's all of the governance information on how to run your meetings, your elections, what it looks like to go out to bond, et cetera. But I just thought it would be helpful for you all to see what that transition process looks like in current law.
Yes. It at least creates the chart. What's the-
I'm sorry if I missed this, but I remember this piece from Act 46 and small towns being really nervous about what would happen. Trying to think of Addison County too, because did they all create, they didn't all create at-large seats. So they said this town gets, like they were really worried about the little towns having representation. Did you already talk about this?
No,
Oh, okay. So they created all kinds of little formations to help the smaller towns.
so if there was a voluntary merger, then they decided it themselves.
Right.
And there's at-large representation, a hybrid model, and proportional representation.
Do you still have that? And like all the little.
Well, and what we found is, some tried to do it and then walked away, just like you said,
Yeah.
or others looked at what it was gonna take to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And went, we don't want to bother, it's like the undertaking
Yeah.
that we're taking, yeah,
Yeah.
it's too hard, it needs to be done,
Right.
but nobody wanted to do it.
So this is like classic project management where you're transitioning from one state to another. I'm just curious. I haven't heard anybody in the AOE conversations kind of put their hand up and say, we have, the following people to plot out this transition, create the project, Gantt charts, et cetera, that move, to keep everybody focused and sane. We need to probably start looking for who that transition person is going to be, because no matter what we do, if we affect anything, we're going to need somebody who's like, that's their total focus.
So this is perfect because it helps us to frame in our mind the amount of work that's involved with it. BOCES passed. Is that still, can we incorporate that in? I mean, it probably might be one of the first things we want to do as far as the property and support, different aspects of support for the special education, when we're forming the districts.
I don't think there have been any BOCES formed under
Yeah, no.
current law yet. I think the secretary testified last week that someone testified from AOE, it may have been the deputy secretary, that they just received their first proposed
Sure.
articles of incorporation for a BOCES. But a BOCES under current state law, and remember, you all get to change it.
Yep.
is a voluntary cooperative formed between supervisory unions. So you could choose to keep that depending on how many supervisory unions you keep in your transformation. You could decide to keep that process, and I don't know that you need to really make any changes to it. You could modify it, or you could do away with it. But it's a voluntary process.
Yeah, I would submit, to your point, Senator Williams, that, there's like 3 different conditions we're looking at here. We're looking at the current condition, we're looking at the future condition, whatever that may be. And BOCES is a third, and it might complicate the situation. So one of our decisions would be whether to
In
pause.
CTE. In CTE.
That's something we have to get to.
We do, yeah.
Get to CTE.
So I lump CTE into there's a
It's a different-
current
Yeah, yeah.
form and there's a future form.
That's a different budget that comes through.
Would you, just so you know this, looking ahead, we have Beth tentatively scheduled for sometime, probably Thursday, talk about the 3 governance structures for CTEs, the 3 existing governance structures, which will set us up then to do our thinking when we get to that.
I don't supposed to raise my hand, but I don't want to get ahead of you, Mr. Chair, or anybody. But I can't see us in the education committees making the districts and then asking someone else to make the wards. I actually see a need to have geographical representation in the House and the Senate, and a special group start working on the lines. Because I think we're gonna run into some, I don't even know if we can do that.
That's a discussion.
Can give recommendations.
One discussion we have to have.
Yeah.
On this, how far are we trying to get by May? What work do we envision over the summer and fall? And
Yeah.
what work do we envision, and there's gonna be a checklist of things that we
Right.
have to develop. And we have to develop, the Gantt chart or,
Right.
and then the question will become, which is logically next, which is logically next, which is logically next, and that's something we have to work toward.
Right.
And, so,
What I
That's it.
can't remember, and it might be good to get our GovOps Ledge Council counterparts in here, but I mean, because we don't have more than 1 congressional seat, we haven't had a lot of other like shenanigans and redistricting processes at the state level besides the House and the Senate. And it seems like a major question to me, because in redistricting, we've said, let's get an independent group to do it. And whenever it's been House and Senate seats, they've come back and we've thrown it in the trash. So my instinct, having been through 2 redistricting periods in the legislature, is that we would probably reject, from a political perspective, a map drawn by an independent commission. I think the whole question of how we do the redistricting is almost a government operations question for people who've been through redistricting. It is one of the most complicated things we do in this bill.
so you're talking about the complication of the creation of wards,
I'm talking about the district. I think,
districts. We'll talk about it. Committee, we're setting aside some committee time,
okay,
but I think we frankly, we have to. And we'll have that discussion.
I think we should do them like with dotted lines.
We can have that discussion. Yeah. So I think from this, and I know you're already thinking this way about what we pull out of the considerations that we have to. And I think this notion of developing something equivalent to a Gantt chart is something we're going to have to get to. But one more question.
Just thinking that, I took a look at the House bill. And it looks like what they did is they took Title 16 and went through and lined through and did a lot of it from that 179 pages, but, and I know I'm gonna get in trouble with you, but I just want to make sure that, you know, you're planning on parallel playing there. And,
With the House or with the governor's proposal?
you know,
Oh, okay.
so. I'm just thinking, you know, at some point, you know, everybody, you're gonna have 640,000 opinions from, that everybody wants to have their voice for.
We'll be taking a lot of testimony.
Just before I leave redistricting, sorry, it's having been on GovOps. If we make these maps before the 2030 census, we will have to redo them pretty quickly after that.
We would have to redo the wards. I suspect it wouldn't necessarily wouldn't have any impact on
Districts.
the districts.
It may not, but if you look at the Senate districts, which are pretty big, let's say there's, you know, a good number of them, we have had to influence our own districts to get the right number.
But for the districts, it doesn't matter if there's, on one level, it doesn't matter if there's 100 people living in another 10,000, that's the district. Then what is having the portion of vote?
I don't know if that's it.
It is for the school, it is, because that's the way it is right now.
It's within, and by the way, we're not gonna have the disparity, but the numbers of people within the districts will shift. By
Yeah.
some degree with every census, but it doesn't, that actually doesn't say anything about the district lines in and of itself. It would say a lot about the ward lines within the district. Because that's where the voting is, because you're voting within your district.
You're voting within your district, so if one county lost population and lost students, we wouldn't think it would matter beyond that.
It won't change the district.
Okay,
Yeah.
It may change.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're not talking about the number of voters.
Yeah.
In a district.
That's where the wards come in.
Yeah, what are you talking about? Are you talking about the number of students? Or are you talking about the number of voters? Like, how do you, in a school ward, what's the relevant criteria? I'm just,
My guess is it has to be, I always just assumed it has to be population. It has to be
straight population.
or,
I feel as though I am out over my
Yeah,
skis on
okay.
this, but I believe you are correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think the analogy here is the state for Senate districts is the district
Mhm.
and the wards are your Senate.
Mhm.
And in this,
It's true.
in this situation, school district situation, the districts is the state,
Right.
and then the wards within each district are your Senate districts.
Right. 'Cause, yeah.
you are probably right. I hadn't thought about it that way, but after a census, we probably have to, the ward lines would have to change and have to figure out that process.
Right, so if we did it by 2028 and then we started the census, I'm just saying, you have to take that into account and maybe do it all over again, so.
And I will just say, there are other representation models. There's at-large, there's a hybrid at-large
Yeah.
model, which is where seats are apportioned, but then everyone votes on those seats. So this is a policy
Yeah.
choice.
And that's the
Right.
testimony we're gonna have to give in.
Right.
About those different models for setting up the.
Right, and all I'm saying is, in my mind, it becomes bigger than the expertise of any one committee. And it starts to be a combination of geography and making sure someone from each committee of jurisdiction is having the same conversation about lines. Because every time you move a line, it changes the whole map, and it is incredibly maddening.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, I don't.
It's a little less complicated because when you're doing house districts, you move the line down in southeast Vermont and it ripples through the whole state and back around.
Exactly. Yeah,
Here you're operating within, depending on the number of
right,
board seats we select, you're talking about
right.
5, 7, 9. That have to get adjusted within a smaller confine. So it's a little, maybe not quite as complicated, but
This is the most complicated. I mean, my vote would be we start now forming the group that's gonna make those decisions, but.
but they can't until we've done the district. So we have to do the districts first and then, because they'll have nothing to work with until we, no. Anyway, well,
Yeah.
we're gonna have some committee time for discussion about that. So, thank you.
Welcome.
And we will, see you on Tuesday, I think. And then get on Thursday, so. Thank you.
Welcome.
Enjoy your weekend.
Enjoy the afternoon.
Takes the rest of the day
So,
out.
and but how long will we be around? Like, call you around or something?
I may still be in committee.
I'll respect you. Okay. Thank you.
But are you jumping right into testimony right now?
Yeah, let's take a